There's a special kind of ambience about a new car showroom. Everything's super bright and clean and shiny. No room here for nasty thoughts about congestion or pollution or rust. But buying a new car is an important decision for everybody. And these are just the kinds of searching questions that need to be asked right here and right at the beginning. For instance, what about safety? Volvo, of course, are well known for promoting the safety of their cars, and yet they don't feature amongst the top 10 most popular models sold in Britain last year, nor, for that matter, do Volkswagen, despite the safe image of their Golf. So clearly, safety is not an overriding consideration. These are examples of those 10 most popular models. Together they account for just about half of all the cars sold in Britain last year. So clearly their design will have a major influence on road safety in years ahead. But how do you tell just how safe any of them are? The first thing to do is to look at the brochure, and it's quite encouraging to see these days just how much space the manufacturers devote to the safety issue. But then they are trying to sell you the thing, and perhaps their analysis isn't quite as objective and maybe even as reliable as you might hope. So what about making your own assessment? Well, there are a few obvious features that you can check for yourself. All-round visibility, for example, worse in some cars than in others, and not notably good in the normally safety-conscious Golf, as we've pointed out before on Top Gear. And then there's comfort. A comfortable seat ensures that you concentrate on the job in hand, so check the support and also the adjustments, particularly for height if you're a very short or perhaps a very tall person. The steering wheel too may adjust up or down, or sometimes even for reach. And then there's the seat belt. It's quite common these days to be able to adjust the top anchorage, but it's not always easy. Here in the Fiesta, it needs a spanner. And what about the layout of the controls and instruments? Well, it's not uncommon, even now, to find that they're masked by the steering wheel or maybe your hands on it, at least for some sizes of driver. And how many more times do we have to complain about low-mounted radios so that it's actually quite dangerous to adjust them whilst you're on the road? And none of these cars has the major controls on steering stalks up here as they do on many of the French cars. Well, that may all seem like pretty obvious stuff, but what about the hidden virtues of such things as the anti-lock braking system, for example? So let's start with ABS. It's not available on any Metro or Nova, but they're both pretty long in the tooth by now. And it's not available on some models of 6 of the rest of the top 10. It's an option on a varying proportion of the model ranges, all of Rover 200s, for example. And it's only fitted as standard on top of the range versions of the final 4 models. The price of the option varies from around £500 to nearly £1,000, a significant sum for all the cars. It's a lot less complicated when it comes to other safety features. Airbags, for example. None of these cars has one. On the brighter side, all the petrol injection models do have fuel cutout switches so that the petrol stops pumping in the event of an accident, and they all have their own approved child seats. But beyond that, the new Astra stands out. Vauxhall have taken the step forward of putting in side impact bars. Now, this is not a new idea, but how long it takes to catch on. None of the other cars has them. They've also installed a belt tensioning device to take up the slack, especially that which occurs down in the reel out of sight in the event of an accident. And it's also a system, by the way, that's been installed in the new Golf. Now, we understand that you'll have to wait till next year before both of these features are available on the new Escort, which came out just a year before the Astra. And similarly, we'll have to wait for new models before these features are available on any of the other top 10 cars. Now, all of this is very confusing if you're trying to weigh up the advantages and disadvantages of the very many different types of car just for safety, let alone for anything else. So what about an expert overall assessment of these factors? The last time Top Gear looked at this subject 3.5 years ago, we drew attention to the Which Car Safety Index. 57 features were checked on all models tested and a single score allocated out of 12. When Which tested examples of these top 10 models, the scores varied from 3 for some Peugeot 205s to 8 for one Cavalier, and that's almost as high as any car has scored.
The index is the only way in which you, as a consumer, can check exactly what the manufacturers are saying. It's like a yardstick by which to measure each of the cars.
So what's been its impact, do you think?
Well, consumers have become more aware of safety. Manufacturers are starting to use it in their advertising, and we've seen quite significant leaps forward over the past few years in terms of what manufacturers are fitting to their cars now as standard.
The main limitation of the Which Safety Index, though, is that it's purely a visual inspection and doesn't involve any real accidents. But since that last Top Gear report, we've seen the publication of this. It's a detailed analysis from police data of all accidents broken down into the models involved. Now, this is the kind of information that's been published in other countries for many years, most notably in Sweden by the Folksam Insurance Group, but it's never been done before here. So how useful is it?
Well, it's definitely a step in the right direction, but there's still added complications when you try to separate out safety actually from the cars and the drivers themselves. For example, the Skoda Estelle comes out very well. Now that car's not driven very quickly, and so it's having more low-speed accidents, so that's probably why it comes out safer. So there are problems, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
The trouble with these accident statistics is that they are inevitably historic, and they don't tell you anything about the brand new models, like, for example, the Escort or the Astra here. For them, you have to rely on crash testing. All new models have to pass certain statutory crash tests, head-on into a concrete wall. It's somewhat artificial, but it is repeatable and gives objective data. How far does the steering wheel move? Do the seats break off? Things like that. Of course, accidents more commonly occur with cars crashing into each other, as in the Auto Express Group's crash between an Astra and a Golf that we showed earlier this spring. It's more realistic, but less easy to analyse or compare. After all, Astras don't only crash into Golfs. The idea of an offset test, rather than one using the whole of the front of the car, is a good one, even when the car is run into a concrete wall rather than into another vehicle, which is what the Fast Lane Group did recently in their test on an Escort. The results were revealing. For instance, there was an underbonnet fire. Ford say they've never known such a fire happen before. But they have recently strengthened the dashboard area, which should reduce the steering wheel intrusion found here. The latest development is to try to improve the offset barrier test by mounting a deformable structure on the concrete block to mimic another vehicle, but in a repeatable fashion. The Transport and Road Research Laboratory are working on it, and it could yield more useful data for the design engineers. But it's important to recognise the scale of the problem that we're setting them. Recently, the Americans decided to increase the speed at which they crash test cars from 30 to 35 miles an hour. Now, that's just a 17% increase in speed, but thanks to the laws of physics, it works out at a 36% increase in the amount of energy that has to be dissipated without any increase in injury. If we then decide that the crash must take place using only half the car, then we're asking it to withstand an even more massive increase in energy. Overall, it would have to be 3 times as effective as current EC law demands. Now, no engineer is going to turn around and say it can't be done, but it will take some ingenuity and it may be expensive. So will they do it? Well, if it's put into law, yes. If not, maybe. Let's take one simple example of a safety design feature that we've become quite familiar with here on Top Gear, the steering wheel. 4 years ago, we showed you this design by the Transport and Road Research Laboratory as an improvement to the original Metro steering wheel. This one's got more padding and it's got a round metal bar at the rim instead of this narrow metal strip on the edge. All of this, of course, is designed to reduce injury in the event of an accident. So how do the top 10 most popular cars in Britain compare to this simple safety ideal? This is part of the Which safety rating, so we've asked their expert, Dr. Steve Rattenbury, to examine each of these cars and rate them for safety. None of them reached the TRRL standard, and there was a wide range of effectiveness, from the best in the Astra and Cavalier to the worst in the Peugeot 205. The point really is this. The research into steering wheels was published years ago, and good, safe design need be no more expensive and need look no worse than any other kind of design. And it can be incorporated into a model at any point in its life. They don't have to wait for years before they build it in. So if we really want the very best of safety in our cars, as well as all the other desirable improvements, then ask a few pertinent questions next time you go to a new car showroom.